make it real. Help us see what this looks like in places across the country that are really taking a community share approach.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marita and Catherine and Karen, for giving us some space to talk about our work, and for our friends and colleagues in Las Cruces with Cruces Creatives who are doing amazing work with us in New Mexico. So yeah, community share, it's been quite an adventure to sort of figure out, well, what could it look like if we really thought about the role of our communities perhaps a little differently than we have traditionally in education. And I'm based in the Sonoran Desert in Tucson, Arizona, where community started as a little seed of an idea about 10 years ago now. And it really grew out of working in a high school actually for 8 years, where I was actually teaching multimedia storytelling. But through that process, I really discovered that our students felt really isolated from our broader community, and started to wonder if there was a way to build stronger partnerships between our community and our students and their aspirations and projects. And so basically over 8 years, I ended up somewhat sort of accidentally matching our students' passions and interests with people in the community who had passion and skills in those areas where students were working on projects. And it was a really amazing experience to watch the co-creation of these projects where young people and folks in the community were working together. And it led to exciting things like reimagining our high school campus, having an exhibit in the United States Senate, testifying in Congress, all kinds of really amazing things where young people were leading the work. The challenge arose, which was somewhat unexpected for me because I hadn't really thought about it, was I ended up leaving the high school after 8 years. And a lot of those, or frankly, most of those connections, that social capital that I had built between our students and the community largely went with me. And so I realized that that was not a very sustainable nor equitable way to think about connecting our communities and our schools, because really I was sort of the holder, if you will, of that social capital. And so a group of us started to wonder, might there be another way to sort of think about how to connect, to be that connective tissue that wasn't so much of a hub and spoke model, which was sort of what I was working at as the hub, to more of a distributed model that democratized connectedness to those community assets. And so I'll just share my screen to kind of walk through a little bit of what that journey has looked like. So about I guess 9 years ago now, a group of us started to wonder if you could create like a human library of human books where people in a community could share their skills, their experiences, and find each other, find educators and young people, and contribute in meaningful ways. Again, this idea of how could you share the social, cultural, creative, and intellectual capital that lives in our communities, whether you're a parent, whether you're a retiree, whether you're a business, a nonprofit, higher ed. What if we really imagined engaging all these kinds of folks that exist in institutions and as individuals? And as Dr. Luis Moll at University of Arizona talks about, sort of the funds of knowledge of all of the folks that exist in a community. And so as I share that with you, I want to take this moment just for you all to think about, in your own life, in your own journey, your own story, what might be some of the gifts, the funds of knowledge that you could contribute if you were going to go into a school or add a school program tomorrow. What are some of the, whether it's your handy skills, whether it's your culture, your language, you're an artist, an athlete, your current jobs, past jobs, what are some of those things that you might, bring to young people? And you're welcome to put those in the chat if you feel comfortable, but it's just a way to kind of reveal, like we do in our communities, what does it look like in this webinar community at the moment. So if you want to add that in, that would be great. So with that, I want to talk a little about why we focus so much on the role of the community. And as I think we all know in this room, that what really, makes a big difference in your lives is yes, what you know, but ultimately who you know opens up doors. And whether we like that or not, that is the reality of the world we live in. And so CommunityShare really is looking at what I would call the intersection of the who and the what. Education space is mostly focused on the what, but what does it look like when we look at that, the slice in between, and how can we create learning opportunities that support both of those spaces? And there's lots of research on the power of social capital, which I'm sure, some of you are familiar in terms of really critical outcomes in terms of socioeconomic mobility, educational attainment, health, happiness, all kinds of really important outcomes that we want to see. Yet again, social capital and those community connections are often overlooked and untapped in education. So with our work, we've developed largely 3 strategies to try to address that building of that social capital and creating those learning opportunities. The first is a digital matching platform. It's sort of that human library, which I'll show you in a second. The second is working with organizations like you'll hear from in a moment, Cruces Creatives and Las Cruces, where we're working with folks who are what we call stewarding a learning ecosystem, which we'll talk about in a second. And then the third piece is really supporting educators to think about what does it mean to design learning experiences with young people and community folks in ways where everyone is learning and growing together. And so we created a fellowship, and now it's multiple fellowships to support that kind of learning. So those have been our primary means to realize this vision. So the human library, I'm just gonna stop sharing for a second so I can show you this adventure that we've been on with the human library. Okay. So some people, and for those of you who have heard this before, but some people think of it as almost like a dating site or a match.com for education. We think it a little more of a human library, but essentially the way it works, and I'll just log in so you can kind of see. I just logged into where I live in Pima County, which is Tucson, where people in our community have essentially created profiles saying, I'm willing to contribute my knowledge and wisdom and skills, and all kinds of folks, so we can just see here, Akiko has signed up as an artist, and, he's described, he's a ceramicist, and a little bit about his background. And then this is actually a project, a mailbox project, it looks like, that he is actively looking to offer to educators and young people. And there's hundreds of these kinds of folks in our learning, in our human library, that have created these profiles: artists, parents, scientists, all kinds of different. And just as another example, a big focus of our work is looking at not just your sort of occupational experience, but your lived experience. Just like we talk about serving the whole young person, we think about how do we engage the whole individual in our community. So, and Adriana, who lives in Tucson, her day job is as a counselor, but what's neat is she's also an artist. And then in the way people describe themselves, they can indicate, in this case, she's a first-gen college grad, she's a skateboarder, she's indigenous, she's Pasquayaki. And then she shared a bit about her family running a Yaki bakery and some of the challenges her own family has faced. So it's really a chance for people to indicate their whole person if they so choose. And then these are actual projects or workshops that Adriana engaged in this past year. You know, the first one using clay to look at culture, folklorico, team building, creating a culture of peace. So, and then a one about identity. So you can see she was quite involved this past year on all kinds of projects, which is exciting. And then educators can search. So they can search by the content area of the kind of partner they're looking for. They can also search by the type of activity that they're wanting to do with a community partner, whether it's a mentor, a job shadow, a guest speaker, a workshop. And then, as I mentioned before, they can search by the life experience of that partner, whether they're a first-gen college grad in the military, multilingual, have disability, neighborhood history. So, and then can they help with things that maybe ideally we would learn in school, but unfortunately sometimes we don't, in terms of budgeting, applying to college, job interviews, skills, networking, all kinds of stuff there. And then you can search by your zip code. So you can search within 10 miles, 50 miles, or now you can actually search anywhere across our national ecosystem. So across, including Las Cruces and North Carolina, Chattanooga, all kinds of places. So, and that was largely driven by a lot of rural communities saying, hey, we have some amazing local community partners, but we may not have the diversity of a larger metropolitan area. Would you kind of expand how we could tap into folks? And so part of building CommunityShare has been really learning with the communities to think about, what would best meet their needs, because we don't pretend to be the experts of this. We have learned and co-designed with the folks that we're doing this work with. And then you can see here, so an educator, as I showed you, can poke around and kind of look for partners. But ultimately what they do is they create a project request. And these are a few projects in the system here in Tucson at the moment. And so essentially they describe the project, and then the system looks and tries to find partners who might be a fit for that project based on how they tag or describe the project. And then if the system finds some potential partners, those profiles pop up, and then an educator, if they like any of them, can just click a button that says invite partner. And then the partner gets an email that says, hey, this educator is doing this project. They thought you would be a great fit. Are you interested in engaging, or is this not a good fit? And so they can say yes or no. And so that's functionally how folks connect. And then there's also events. Events are essentially kind of one-offs, like a guest speaker, or as you can see, a math and science night. And then the other piece is organizations. In addition to the individual profiles, they can post opportunities where they're actively looking to engage with young people and educators. So you can see in Tucson, there's a Camp Cooper's, has an outdoor ed program, a water leadership program. So all these kinds of resources available where they're actively looking to engage folks. And then as someone that teaches multimedia storytelling, I'm really passionate about how do we share the stories of these kinds of projects. So the neat thing is not all of the projects, but some of the projects, we sort of create little case studies, if you will, so people can see what's possible. And this is just an example of one where over 6 weeks, middle schoolers connected with seniors in a senior center where they were doing oral histories. And then the partner was actually a painter, and the painter taught the students portraiture. And then each student created a portrait of the person they interviewed, and then that gave them the painting as a gift back to them. And this was during the heart of COVID, actually. So it was a very not only impactful learning experience, but frankly, an important intergenerational and emotional connection. And then there's photos and videos of all kinds of things. This was another project where 60 middle schoolers looked at designing sustainable cities on the moon. So they worked with a designer and they drew sketches of them and built out 3D prototypes. And you may recognize Senator Kelly, who's kind of been in the news a little lately. He was, as an astronaut, he engaged and critiqued their work, which was very exciting since the topic was the moon. And so it's a way to really highlight those kinds of projects. And then on the back end, I'll just show you quickly, there's a space where all the connections that are happening can be seen and monitored. This is sort of what we call the steward platform. And so you can see an example where the impact of on the number of students in Pima County over the past year. So it tracks through a survey that we send out the number of students and impact on engagement, social emotional development, career college readiness, and those durable skills and so forth. And it allows you to do a lot more than that, but that gives you a sense of it. Basically enables you to see who invited who and what was the impact of all those connections, which is exciting. So I'm going to go quickly back to my PowerPoint and wrap up, and then turn it over to folks. So just quickly to wrap up here. So just to give a couple more examples of projects, because I always think those stories are really important. This was a project actually that just wrapped up this past May, where middle schoolers were looking at why their neighborhoods didn't have access to as many parks as other parts of Tucson, Arizona. And so middle schoolers and high schoolers spent a year learning geospatial technology and other mapping techniques from university faculty, graduate students, and undergrads to learn how to map those green spaces, and then to analyze the data, and then actually to create geospatial story maps. And what was really neat is it was the undergrads and grad students mentoring high school students mentoring middle school students, and then actually eventually middle school students mentoring elementary school students. So it was really weaving in what, career college readiness, as well as peer-to-peer mentoring, as well as social emotional development and project-based learning. So it was an exciting project. And as you can see, Lexana, who was involved in a previous iteration of a similar project, she shared this with her teacher, Jackie, and it was really powerful to see how these kinds of experience impacted her. And now, she's an engineering student at ASU. Another project that, as Cheryl will speak to a little later, is we can never talk about CommunityShare without not talking about lemurs. As some of I used to study lemurs. And so one of the really neat projects that happened through Cruces Creatives was Millie was working with folks at Cruces Creatives, which you will learn more about in a second. And she was interested in starting her own sort of fashion business inspired by lemurs and fashion themes in Madagascar. And there were no lemur primate sort of experts or biologists in the area. So I ended up being fortunate enough to connect virtually with Millie because I had studied lemurs. And it was a really cool opportunity to support an 11-year-old in her thinking about not only lemurs, but, she had lots of questions about careers in studying primates. And then she ended up creating that fashion business with the support of Cruces Creatives, and then all the proceeds from that actually ended up going to the Duke Lemur Primate Center. So it was a really cool example of, and this was in an out-of-school time space, how entrepreneurship and science and all kinds of things were woven together. And then the second example, we had students in an out-of-school space spend 3 months learning physics, chemistry, and arts through glass blowing. And so they spent, I think it was 12 sessions with a real glass blowing studio. And then they ended up having, they created a business plan to open their own studio. So it was a really cool way for all these different disciplines to be woven together again. And then I just wanted to mention this project, which was in Yuma, Arizona, where a family in Yuma had just moved into a domestic violence shelter. And the teacher that we were working with heard about this and talked to his students, and apparently they didn't have a dining room table set when they moved in. And the students and the teachers said, hey, instead of doing what we were going to do, wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually build something that was going to have a meaningful impact in our community? And so they found a cabinet maker in Yuma locally, and he mentored the students, and they ended up building that dining room table set and donating it to the family and the shelter. And then what was really neat is they actually ended up writing about what does it mean to have a shared space to break bread, to eat together and talk together. So again, it's not just about the technical skills, but it's also about what does it mean to be human, and how do we contribute to something larger than ourselves, right? And ultimately, that's our hope for CommunityShare, is to, frankly, in some ways, rehumanize an education system that has amazing humans in it, but sometimes the systems have stripped us of some of those deeper identities and connections. And speaking of that, a lot of our work is also about honoring and celebrating the identities of our students. So in this case, and Daniel, an Indigenous Navajo author, connected with some kindergarten students and helped them develop their own stories and become authors of their own stories through writing, and that improved their reading skills, which is exciting. But equally important was that for many of these students, this was the first time they ever saw an author who looked like them, frankly. And so a lot of this work is framed by this framework, which is that the learning should really be driven by the curiosity and passions of our students and young people, that it should be enriched by the unique wisdom and assets of our community, and that ultimately this work can be in service of contribution, not only to our own well-being, but to the well-being of our community. And so there's lots of applications to this, which I've already alluded to. And over the past 9 or so years, we've connected about 45,000 young people in 10 states now, and lots of exciting impacts, which Cruces Creatives and we'll talk about as well. And then these are when we talk about partnering with different regional entities, these are the folks that are actually stewarding those learning ecosystems, which we'll talk about later in a second. And I'm going to leave it at that because I know we have a lot to pack in, but I'm happy to answer any more questions specifically about CommunityShare. But I'm excited to hear from our friends in Las Cruces who are doing an incredible job of making this kind of work real. I'm honored to have had the pleasure of partnering with them. So I'll turn it back over to Catherine.
Great. Thanks, Josh. And we're going to bring on the Cruces Creative folks in just a second. But we did have a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to save one for our Q&A towards the end, but I wonder if you could speak to whether or not young people themselves can access the library, either by filling out profiles or looking at them and finding their own connections. How do youth directly engage in the system?
Yeah, it's a great question. And maybe Cruces Creatives can speak to that a little later, because they've been have had some really creative approaches to that. But currently, the platform is for the educators, whether it's in school or out of school spaces, to use. Having said that, I know myself and others where they're actually going on and young people are looking at it with educators and deciding who they want to engage. But we haven't had educators directly messaging or connecting to date, primarily for safety reasons of making sure that there's an adult sort of in monitoring and making sure it's a safe connection. But we also are looking into ways that potentially young people could have a space on there where those conversations could be monitored by that adult. But we're at the moment, it's really facilitated by the educator. But as I said, Cruces Creatives have done some pretty cool things in their own projects where young people are pitching projects, and then they're able to connect with those folks. So there are creative ways to support that.
Great. Well, without further ado, we keep alluding to Cruces Creative, so I'm going to ask Pat DiSimeo and Cheryl Carrion to join us on screen. Pat, I would love to start with you. Can you tell us just a little bit about Las Cruces and what sparked the launch of CommunityShare at Cruces Creatives? What need was CommunityShare meeting in the community?
Absolutely. So we've gotten to work with Josh and the CommunityShare team since 2019 now, and we've been delighted with the results. In brief, the partnership grew out of existing community efforts to improve educational opportunities for kids in Las Cruces. In brief, Las Cruces is a medium-sized, heavily agricultural city. We tend to hug the banks of the Rio Grande in far southern New Mexico. Like a lot of New Mexico, we're a minority as majority community, about 60% Hispanic and 30% Anglo. And so we like to say we're a little short on money, but very rich in community. The city motto is people helping people, and it actually fits. Las Cruces has one of the highest charitable giving rates in the country, despite high poverty levels. And there's a ton of volunteering to make the community better. And on the topic of making the community better, one of the big needs in our community and in this broader state is education, largely because of the entrenched generational poverty in the area. Kids face a lot of challenges. The poverty has its direct attendant reductions in opportunity. There's race-based discrimination, and there are unusually high rates of adverse childhood experiences. So the community has been coming together to find ways to give our kids the best chances they can have. And CommunityShare in Las Cruces grew particularly out of two efforts. One is the community schools movement. And I'd imagine lots of attendees here are familiar with it, but in case it's a new concept, the community schools has two main pillars. Pillar one is integrating education with community life. So making sure that school is relevant and that kids and community members can connect. The other pillar is wraparound support services for students and their families. Things like on-site food pantries, counselors at schools, dental offices at the schools, benefit coordinators for state and federal resource programs, and all sorts of things that can help kids meet some pretty important preconditions for learning. So Las Cruces launched its first community school in 2018, Lynn Middle School, which was the same time that Cruces Creatives officially opened. Cruces Creatives is our area's somewhat unusual makerspace, which might also be a newer term, and we're a weird one anyway. In brief, as at its fullest potential, a makerspace can be like a giant community toolbox. We try to offer all sorts of tools. We've got a little over 12,000 square feet with cabinetry grade woodworking, laser cutters, CNC machines, computer design stations, digital audio recording, stage and performance space, stained glass work. If codes will let us get away with it at this point, we've got it. And then we have all of the people who come together through these tools. So we've got a community of about 6,000 people actively involved in the makerspace with all sorts of skill sets. And you combine the tools, the caring creative people, and the nonprofit umbrella of the makerspace. And it's hard to find a societal need where you can't launch an interdisciplinary charitable project. So from the start, we were working with community-engaged project-based learning, connecting kids in classrooms with local artists to beautify the schools with murals, connecting kids with bike and skateboard repair folks to learn mechanics, engineering, and fix up their own and their classmates' bikes. And through the community schools especially, we got to work with a program called ASLO, which is Spanish for Make It, Do It. And this is a program that connected students or small groups of students with mentors, makerspace tools, and project-based funding to complete projects that the kids proposed, almost like a smaller scale version of CommunityShare. So we had a local musician mentor student to record her first album with original songs. Had Millie's Lemur Project, the social entrepreneurship program that was an Oslo initiative through CommunityShare. But basically, we had this parallel evolution of trying to meet educational needs. It just makes sense. And so it also just turned out that the director of the community schools in Las Cruces, Dave Greenberg, had been basically a neighbor of Josh's who had lived in Las Cruces. And so when Josh and Dave were talking about all of the great educational initiatives that Josh was leading in Arizona and that Dave was helping to spearhead in Las Cruces, there was a need for a community node, a nexus, that could help launch CommunityShare in Las Cruces and reach out to the community and ideally provide some of the tools and project-based management expertise to make the community-engaged project-based learning maximally effective. So back in 2019, we got to launch CommunityShare Las Cruces in partnership with Josh and the Las Cruces Community Schools. And it's worked wonderfully. Cheryl has a few more examples to share. Actually, she has hundreds of examples to share, but she's going to pick a handful that best illustrate the potentials.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like a confluence of a lot of really great circumstances and a lot of really great things going on for kids that CommunityShare was able to come into and help leverage. Cheryl, I would love to hand it over to you. We've heard the overview of CommunityShare. We've heard about everything that was going on in Las Cruces that made sense for CommunityShare Las Cruces to launch. Can you give us one or two examples? I wish we had time for hundreds, but one or two examples that it really illustrate how CommunityShare has come to life in maybe schools, but maybe also I think one of the things that's sort of really exciting in Las Cruces is it's also in out of school time spaces and places. Can you give us a couple of examples of how this has come to life?
Absolutely. Thank you for having us today. I think as I've met Josh's team in Arizona, I've heard from lots of CommunityShare sites that begin on the school side or the district side and begin there. So it's probably a more novel approach for this to happen from a makerspace. Pat and the team have just done an incredible job of providing resources through the makerspace. So we're finding, these systems can start from anywhere, but really exciting to be a part of it. I taught school for 31 years, and we used to have like a list of people you could come and get to talk, and then you started playing phone tag. And so I think at the heart of this is communication with all the advances has gotten more difficult because teachers are so busy, and phone tag is hard, especially for teachers who don't even go to the bathroom during the day, literally. And so some of the projects that have been really exciting in two different directions, teachers can start with projects or events. So things that are one day, one time experiences like whole school literacy nights or health and wellness fairs, or it could be a project that we tie people into, and maybe that could have looser dates. So one of the events we did was a dear friend of mine. He was teacher of the year right before I was. And he said, "Hey, I'm thinking we have this track meet every year and kids are just sitting around. Maybe we can reframe that and invite people to table and give kids resources and have a health and wellness fair." So smart, brilliant guy. And yes, we could do it. And he got on the platform, and in 25 minutes, he created his profile, created the event, which was Health and Wellness Fair, and he invited 40 community partners in. And that was the first year we did that together a couple of years ago. Incredible day, high schoolers hanging out, and all these local partners came to bring them resources. And one conversation I heard was a kid saying, "Oh my gosh, I get teary when I talk about a lot of these experiences, but one kid said, "It's my senior year. What if I decide to go to college?" And it's the spring of their senior year. And that really got me just really passionate about the fact that we must connect kids. We owe it to them. And the research on social capital building is very compelling. But kids aren't connected. They don't know people. They don't know where to go, and they don't know how to sign up for college. And teachers are perfectly placed to help facilitate that. So really exciting stuff. I won't cry for this one, but it is about tacos and it is Tuesday. So food trucks, another incredible example. A teacher said, I wonder if I can apply for your mini grant. I really want a food truck to come. The kids are designing a food truck in 2D, and I think this would be a great way to facilitate that. And can you all pay for tacos? And I'm like, yes, we can help you get tacos to your school. Of course we can. So the kids the first year did that 2D design. We had an amazing, incredible Latina local businesswoman come to the school with her food truck, talk about entrepreneurship, the skills she has, the soft skills needed, and they got tacos. But it was so brilliant, and started working with this teacher about that idea and a local group, FYI, to really talk about the cell components that were so strong there for kids to be able to talk about, hey, if your family had a food truck, like what sorts of foods would they have? What colors would it be? How would it be decorated? And then what if you had your own food truck? How would that change and how could that look different? And a perfect way to really infuse projects with this cultural component that really allows kids to explore identity, think about it, think about their family and the cultural components. And it was lived. So this businesswoman created a big brick and mortar in the time since we've worked with her. Now her parents have the food truck. They've come out to lots of experiences, and the kids get CTE. They get connections. They get to they hear about the soft skills they need if she's going to hire you. And it's just a beautiful way to help address a myriad of issues, including really poor attendance right now after COVID, difficulty with getting kids engaged. There's a kind of a checked outness after COVID. Cell needs to be infused. We're working harder for career tech and internship opportunities. And these projects are just an incredible way to address all of those issues and needs.
Great. That's great, Cheryl. Thank you. As you were talking, I was visualizing the slide, Josh, that you put up with all those different outcomes, and kind of you can hear the variety of outcomes that are being achieved through the projects, and also that Venn diagram of the what and the who, that powerful example of even just the folks to help think about and make those connections to college. Thanks for sharing those, Cheryl, and hopefully we'll have time to hear a couple of more. Josh, as I was listening to you talk about Tucson, and Cheryl was talking about and Pat were talking about the unique nature of the makerspace in Las Cruces, I wonder what the process of co-creation looked like between Cruces Creative and CommunityShare, and how the partnership has evolved over time.
Yeah, I can start, and I'd love to hear their Cruces Creatives perspective as well. But I mean, honestly, it started not knowing what was possible, frankly. It's one thing to grow something in your own community, but to bring it to a community you are not a part of. In some ways, who do I think I am, thinking that something would work in one place would work in another, even though scale is like everyone talked about scale, but to really do it in a way that honors the unique heritage of a place, the unique assets and challenges of a place. And so I think part of co-creation was frankly just learning and listening to each other and trying to figure out how do we grow this in a way that's honoring of the work that Cruces Creatives is already doing. It's not like we're building a learning ecosystem. A learning ecosystem already existed. It's how do we support and grow it and steward it. It's not building something from scratch, which I think sometimes people think, oh, we have to create the ecosystem. It already is there. And so I think a part of it is just listening and learning and trying things. And some things, frankly, worked and some things didn't work. And so saying, okay, well, we tried it. Can we iterate it? And also, as I think Pat put in the chat, a big part of their work has been offering grants to support these projects. And that was a big part of our model too. And we realized that in our platform, for example, there's no way for teachers to post a project and then to say we actually need funding for it. And so they had a separate process for doing that. And they said, would there be a way that you could build it in? And we thought about it and essentially co-designed that with them. And so that's when I think about what does it mean to evolve, is really listening and seeing what their aspirations and trying to make happen. And is there a way we can help support that? And how do we create the solution together? And so that was a concrete example where we built it in. So a teacher posts a project and then they can indicate whether they need funding or they don't need funding, rather than creating a whole separate process. And so finding places where it's really a win-win for everyone involved. And now really Cruces Creatives is, they don't, at the beginning, we were sort of co-creating that vision and plan and they're, as you can tell, running with it. And again, we're still continue to learn together because this is not easy work. So yeah, it's been a beautiful partnership.
I love your point that the ecosystem already existed, right? We talk a lot about that young people are constantly learning and growing in learning and development ecosystems. It's not about creating them. It's about helping them be healthy and strong. And that's what I'm hearing that you all were able to do together. And I think a big part of that, Josh, you talk a lot about the role of the stewards, that they're a big part of what makes CommunityShare work. They're a big part of what makes learning ecosystems work. They support the connections made in the system and so much more. Can you share a little bit with us about the steward role?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think, one thing again is that the role of stewarding a learning ecosystem looks different in every community. And I know, again, there's like, what's the best practice or what's the model, and you sort of replicate it. And in our eyes, there are some underlying roles and capabilities, but it doesn't express itself the same in every place. And I think for some that may be challenging, but for us, that's actually the strength, is that it's honoring that uniqueness of each community. And I might just quickly share my screen. Just as a photographer, I'm a visual learner, so I'm a screen sharer. I'm just gonna show this because I think it helps a little bit. So I sort of think of the idea of stewards as the heart of a learning ecosystem, and CommunityShare is sort of like the circulatory system. It's helping to circulate those different forms of capital. And if the heart, the Cheryls and the Pats and the Abbies and the other stewards that are at Cruces Creatives, if that is not healthy and robust and supported, there frankly is nothing to circulate. So I really see the stewards as critical to this work. And there's lots of way to think about stewardship, but essentially I think of sort of 4 overarching roles. One is around engaging the community in meaningful ways and relational, non-transactional ways. And that's a huge piece of the work. Another piece is how do we celebrate the stories of this work so people can see what's possible? Because we can't create a new narrative for education and learning if we're not celebrating those sort of micro stories of new narratives. The third is really around strategy, meaning like looking at the data and figuring out, what kinds of, how we're going to shift the way we're approaching community engagement or education engagement. Strategy also might be what kinds of supports are needed, like a grants program or a fellowship. So really thinking about that. And then the third piece is, how do we support a culture of this kind of community engaged learning and a pedagogy around it? And so that can mean all kinds of things, whether it's a community of practice or professional development workshops or what have you. But these four components are really essential, I believe, for a healthy stewarding of an ecosystem. And there's lots more, but in 2 minutes, that's my brief synopsis of stewardship.
Great, thank you. And Pat, I think we've lost Cheryl, so I'm wondering if you can jump in here. Josh just said it, that the steward role looks a little different in every community. I wonder if you can share a little bit, some concrete examples of what the stewarding role looks like in Las Cruces. Oh, there's Cheryl's back. Sorry, welcome back, Cheryl. I'm going to put you right on the spot. Josh
okay.
just finished sharing the stewarding role, and like he said in his introduction, and Pat, feel free to jump in as well, since Cheryl is just rejoining us. Would love to hear some concrete examples of what the stewarding role looks like in Las Cruces, how it plays out in Las Cruces.
Pat, let me know if you have anything you want to say, but I'm ready. Sorry, Wi-Fi wasn't ready, but I'm ready.
I'd be happy to give the overview, and then you could provide some specific details.
Perfect.
So at Cruces Creatives, we've broken the stewardship roles into 4 different components. We have the education coordinator role, who interacts with teachers, who supports them in their needs, and who brings teachers onto the platform and basically supports them and their students. Cheryl fills that role wonderfully in Las Cruces, especially as an educator with 31 years of experience, teacher of the year. She has the knowledge, passion, and connections to fill the role beautifully. We also have a community engagement coordinator whose job is to, as it were, source titles for the human library and loop community members into the platform to find skills and needs that might not already be on the platform in response to particular requests from teachers. The education coordinator and the community coordinator work very closely together. So Abby and Cheryl are a fantastic team. To support project-based learning, we also have basically a process review team who make sure that the materials, the workflows, all of the logistical aspects of a project are in place. And we also have a finance team who orders the materials, provides the supplies, so none of the funding travels through the teachers with all of the complicated tax implications there. Teachers don't have to spend extra time ordering the supplies. They're available for pickup at the makerspace, or they can even be delivered to the classroom. And then we have the grants team that helps put together project ideas and make sure that they can be funded. But it could look a lot of different ways depending on the community needs. And Cheryl can give a lot more detail about the day-to-day processes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we definitely have those kind of basic roles, but just like the projects we're doing, the teachers we serve, the KIT students that we serve, things fluctuate as we tap into our gifts of the head, the heart, and the hands. And so Abby is amazing, and she's working on a degree in the mental health realm. She's also really tapped into the yoga in town, musicians, and NMSU, where she has worked. And so she facilitates a lot of those connections. And I've been, like Pat said, a teacher for a long time. And in the state, I work with community schools. I'm appointed on some coalitions. I've been with our union organizers, and just in a variety of ways, we tap into and facilitate relationship building for us as well. And that helps draw into the network. what's incredible about that is just like the students needing that social capital, teachers do too. So we have brand new teachers that don't have any experience or maybe connections, maybe older teachers who don't have maybe the tech skills or haven't brought people in. And so what's wonderful is that we can provide accommodations for the teachers and help them maybe with the tech piece or and especially meet them at their level. So if they've been teaching out of the book, they've never done hands-on learning, it's not part of their practice, we can help get them started with just, hey, why don't we bring in a speaker? And so that they aren't completely overwhelmed, or if their capacity is just maxed out, which is a lot of teachers right now. And for teachers who are seasoned and they've been doing lots of projects, we can help them connect with multiple partners over the course of a year for one unit or for multiple units. So we do have lots of teachers that have multiple projects going and over multiple years. So it's incredible that stewarding is a lot of things. It looks like a lot of things. It's a lot of relationship building. And then really we're those connectors for Cruces Creatives to be out in the community, as well as the connector for teachers. So we start with like, what do you want to do? What do your kids want to do? And that's always our starting place. Oh, you know what? I should say one more thing. We definitely support our districts. And so when our districts are in our state are saying, we really want to infuse more CTE, we really want, we from the get-go, this supported those community school efforts. And what's so interesting is community schools was doing everything. Like they were bringing in the resources, they were meeting as a team, they were doing all of that, except one piece that wasn't there, which is instruction connected to the community. Probably the most important piece, but that has been really incredible that we can help teachers with that part. So we really stay in touch with the district and the community and see where the needs are and then be responsive and see it. And it starts there with really our community.
That's great. I wonder just in our last couple of minutes if I'd open it up to anybody, if you could share a little bit. We've talked a lot about the impact for students, and Cheryl, you were just talking about some of the impact for the districts and the teachers, but what has been the impact for the community? How has having CommunityShare Las Cruces impacted the community members who engage, or Las Cruces as a community with this mission of people helping people?
I definitely, in so many ways, and one of our first projects was a community school group, which you think we used to say at-risk kids, and now we're really saying these are historically underserved kids that we know we need to do better for. And those kids a lot of times receive a lot of resources, but that school, it was Lynn, it was the first school to become a community school. They built a wheelchair for Hope, who was small of stature and needed a wheelchair. So what an incredible opportunity first to tap kids in need into community service is just, wow. So incredible. That's happening a lot. And right now we have a special ed class, the most restrictive, a D-level setting, who just built a little library for a community partner. It's going to be dedicated to somebody who's helped with community, with little libraries. It's going to be dedicated to her son who passed away. A really beautiful opportunity. And on kind of a lighter level, we had a teacher who was teaching driver's ed, probably one of the hardest things that is the most hands-on, and we've made it very book learning. But she was at an early college high school. She said, I really need to bring this to life for kids. We're finishing up a unit on drug and substance impact on driving, and then we're going to start another one. And we brought in a bang up group for her. So we had a local attorney who's super dynamic. Her name is Scheherazade Booth, and really compelling for kids, also with the CT component. Abby in the mental health realm talked about with kids about the effects of drugs on logistically on a body, and then a lot of the cell pieces of an accident. I reached out to an insurance agent who's been in our network, and I said, do you feel okay to talk to high schoolers? And she says, Cheryl, I have to talk to high schoolers about the impact of texting on driving. I'm seeing this played out in real life every day, and it's horrific. And she was so motivated to talk to kids. And then the last one, we really wanted something for the sciencey kiddos. So we seeked out an engineer. He signed up just for this project. He works at Spaceport and Space Force, really dynamic. And he had an app where kids could put in their weight and calculate the physics of an accident at 5 miles an hour upward. These are things that teachers are not the best suited to deliver for kids. This adds that real world CTE component. And one thing that we haven't mentioned so much, I work closely with NEA, and they have recently released an article saying state by state, still, even in New Mexico, teachers do not represent the students they serve. And it's unfortunate, but it's a truth. The EAs often do, but we can impact that diversity by helping every educator expand their walls so they bring in these really diverse speakers that maybe are atypical and show gender differences in job types, just everything. So from state senators to taco truck vendors, we help students get connected.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And our time has just flown by. Thank you all for hanging on with us for a couple of extra minutes. Thank you to Josh for lifting up CommunityShare, to the Cruces Creative team for bringing in your on-the-ground real-world examples. And we hope that you all will join us for our next webinar. We will be talking about credit for learning outside of the classroom. We hope that we will see you all on September 17th for that one at the same time. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful